Hello, everybody. It's me, Adam, here with some exciting news. The Adam Ruins Everything podcast has been nominated for a Webby Award. That's an award given to websites and also podcasts. Huge thanks to you, our listeners, and podcast producers Max Fun and Shara Morris for making our podcast not one to miss. And now we need your votes. Go to vote.webbyawards.com and search Adam Ruins Everything, or find our category, Podcast and Digital Audio, Science and Education, and cast your vote. You can vote through April 20th, so vote, spread the word, and help us win a big metal spring. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Adam Ruins Everything, the podcast. I am your host, Adam Conover. I am also the host of a show on True TV called Adam Ruins Everything. We are currently in our off-season, but you can find clips and full episodes of that show at truetv.com/Adam Ruins Everything and the Watch True TV app. But in the meantime, you can listen to this podcast right now. Here's what we're going to do. On the TV show, I talk to incredible experts from the world of science, journalism, everything else for just a short period of time. On this show, I get to talk to them for way longer. And frankly, it's my favorite thing to do because guess what? Experts are fascinating. Did you guys realize that? If a person who spent like their whole life learning about one thing, if you have any level of curiosity in that thing, you're going to want to talk to them and hear what they have to say. Honestly, if you are ever bored, talk to an expert. That's my advice. Just go out and find one. There's one in your world right now. There's someone in your life who knows a lot about something who you haven't spoken to in a little while. And you know what I mean? You guys follow what I'm saying? And ask them what they know about that you don't. I'm hyperventilating because I'm getting so excited to talk to experts about fascinating topics. All right, but which one are we going to talk to on this show? Oh, I'm so glad you asked. His name is Roy Samaan. He appeared on our Adam Ruins Housing episode to talk about Airbnb. Roy researches housing issues at Lane, the Los Angeles Alliance for a New Economy. In Adam Ruins Housing, we talked about the dark side of Airbnb, the way in which, Airbnb is a wonderful service, but it actually has some negative effects on our neighborhoods and on housing prices in this country. And by the way, I don't know if you guys have heard, we're going through a nationwide housing crisis right now. And it's a really complicated issue, but a really interesting one, and one I've always been fascinated by. So I'm really excited to have Roy on the show and for you guys to hear his perspective. So let's just jump right into it. Hey, well, Roy, thank you so much for coming in to do the podcast and to do the show.
Yeah, it's great. It's great to be back.
We had you dangle out of a fake window on the TV show.
I made it. I'm here. I'm still in one piece.
You had one of a classic, I think, expert exit on the show, which is that we had you pretend to fall and go, ah! Which is just that's
yes.
That's what really gets me going is when we can make an expert do something truly stupid that's just borderline comedy.
It was right on the cusp.
It was also hot out. You were stuck outside. I really appreciate you were very patient on that day.
I got well powdered though. The lady kept me blushed and nice. So
yeah. One of the real pleasures of the show is getting to see makeup put on academics and scholars and advocates, and just to see their faces aren't powdered. And it's interesting to see it happen.
Yeah.
Well, so tell me a little bit about Lane and what you guys do generally, and what you do more specifically.
Yeah. So Lane has been around for a little over 20 years.
What's it stand for?
The Los Angeles Alliance for a New Economy. So we've been around for about 20 years. We do research, advocacy, organizing, communications work, really all about raising up working families and making sure that the folks that kind of make our cities tick are able to make ends meet. And so what I do is I'm a researcher, and I've been looking into the short-term rental industry, which is this phenomenon that has really swept, from coast to coast, and it, from what we have, determined in our work, it is making it harder to make ends meet here in the city of LA.
So that's really interesting because, obviously that's been a huge revolution. Airbnb and the other sites. What do you VRBO? Are there others?
Yep. There are others. There's like a lot of. I guess we can call them ankle biters, right? They've got like 5, 10 listings, but it is like this kind of cottage industry, right? Yeah. These little guys are springing up. They're trying to get a piece. And so that's been like a revolution in every city. It's been as big as ride sharing, where ride sharing sort of transforms just getting around a city, and then but those short term rentals transform when you're traveling, and then B, now so many people are renting out a piece of their home, and I've got multiple friends who do Airbnb.
It's like so it seems so entrepreneurial, and like, oh, everyone's got a way to make a little bit of extra money. It seems such a win-win, and that's often how it's presented, right? Like the person staying gets to stay in a nice home, and then the person there gets to, the person renting it out gets to make a little cash. Why, in your view, would it make it harder to make ends meet?
Sure. Well, so I mean, it's a great idea in theory. It's like a lovely concept, right? You get to kind of live the life of a local for a little bit while you're traveling. Unfortunately, when we're in a situation as we are in many cities where there just aren't enough rental units to go around, we haven't been keeping up with the demand. So there's low vacancy, and you're taking units off the market. It's kind of a supply and demand question. You have less of something, and the price of whatever's left over has to go up. And so, it is kind of the twist to the whole thing that for the individual person, they might be making some extra money, but the effect is that they're actually raising the prices for kind of everybody around them. And so that's kind of the central problem with these things.
Well, so I know that LA is in a horrible, has a horrible housing market, and is, I think by some measures, has the worst rental market in the country. It's really funny when I have conversations with I moved here from New York, and I have conversations with friends from New York, and they go like, "Oh yeah, I got to move to LA. It's so much cheaper out there." And I'm like, "It's not. It's the most expensive rental market in the country, and you need to buy a car. You can't get around in a Metro card."
That's right.
And then they blank for a second, and then they go, "But you get so much more space." And I'm like, "Wait a second, that's a different argument."
Yes, that's a different
Space
question.
is the cost of living is the cost of living. Space is a perk. Oh, we all love to have it, but now you're talking about something different. So I understand that about Los Angeles, but can you explain how Airbnb would cause the rental prices overall to go up?
Sure, yeah. So what we found, and so look, I want to be clear, like when you are setting a rental price, that's a really complicated thing, and we have never said that rents are high in LA just because of Airbnb. There's a lot of problems in the city, right? That's an understatement. But when you go to a neighborhood like Venice or Hollywood or some of these real hot areas with a very tight rental market, you don't have enough to go around as it is for people that live here, and then you create an incentive to move units off the market. You can make a lot more money renting out your unit on Airbnb on a nightly basis to a tourist than you could to a tenant. And some of the recent work that we've done looks at kind of how many nights it would take to break even. So, what we found
for the landlord,
for the landlord,
for the owner of the rental unit, the guy or gal who owns the building.
Yeah. That's right. So, how many nights until they start making more money than an average rent? And so, what we found is it's about 83 nights a year. That's where you start making more money on Airbnb than renting. So, a unit can sit there vacant for most of the year, for 3/4 of the year, and the person can still make it as much, right?
Oh, so you're saying that putting it on Airbnb for 83 days, and then the other 9 months of the year it's vacant, that earns as much money as one 365-day rental tenant.
Yep.
Wow.
Plus, you don't have to worry about the tenant complaining about leaky faucets and my this and that, all the stuff, all the upkeep, because travelers don't tend to really be too concerned with that sort of thing.
So it kind of, I guess, in your view, turns this commodity that was previously exclusively used by renters, this one sort of customer who also is the exact type of customer who, there's a societal need to have used that for that purpose. But now there's another way you can use that box of space that you own, that you can rent it out and to people on Airbnb and make more money, and then so that's an incentive for the landlords to take it off the market and do that. So have you seen the phenomenon of that literally happening in real time, or?
Yeah, no, definitely. We've seen, again, in some of these real hot neighborhoods that are going through gentrification, going through a lot of other changes, right? But in a place like Venice, we have seen landlords just stop renting out units as tenants leave, so that they can then just put those onto the Airbnb market. There was one case where the landlord was I think especially kind of blunt about the whole kind of arrangement, where they actually evicted a bunch of tenants out of a fourplex in the area. They'd been living there for many years, walk their dogs in the neighborhood, and the whole kind of wonderful community feel that they had going on. They're out. They're out on the street. They got to figure out another living situation, and this fourplex is now on the Airbnb market, right? So,
is that illegal to do that, to evict them? For
it's
that
pretty
reason?
illegal.
Yeah,
And it's definitely not. You can say, I'm getting out of rental market. I'm going to turn this into a condo. I'm going to knock it down. I'm going to do whatever I want. But you can't say, I'm getting out of the rental market. You guys got to leave, and then continue to rent it, but just for like shorter periods of time. It's definitely illegal here in California.
I see. So by at least the local laws
Yep.
here. Is that Airbnb's fault though? If I mean, the shady landlords will be shady
Sure,
landlords. We
sure.
had slumlords and
Yep,
people like that
yep.
before Airbnb came along.
That's right. That's right. It's not. They make it easy, I guess, is my point. They don't really, keep tabs on what's happening on their platform, and they just make it so simple. And they, when you go on to the site, you could enter your address and it'll tell you could probably make this much every night based on what's around you.
Really?
Yeah,
I've
yeah.
not
It's
used
part
that.
of the signing up process. Like if their product, I guess in a way, is the host, right? Their product is the homes that are around the city. So when you go on there and it says, well, you could make this much, as a landlord, I mean, you're not in the landlord business to provide social service. You're in the landlord business to make some money.
Of course.
So you go on there, you see how much you can make. They send a photographer out, right, to take some pictures of your place, make it look real pretty, and that makes it simple to do this. And I guess the flip side is also that they don't monitor what's going on. So
Yeah.
so there could be a lot of shenanigans, and they don't care, right? They, until it becomes like a PR issue, they're not going to really, get too involved in it.
Yeah, I mean that's the part that always struck me. What sort of put my antenna up to this issue was a couple of factors. One, an anecdote I'll tell in a second. But the first thing was that in New York, where I lived, when I first became aware of this, there started to be like a battle with the city because there were all of these illegal Airbnb rentals. That I forget what the stat is. We say it on the show,
Yep.
but a very high number of Airbnb rentals are against the city short-term rental laws. And
I think it was like 70% or something in
Yeah.
New York. It was pretty high.
and the laws are very basic. It's a maximum or minimum. Like you can you can't rent out a whole unit for less or more than X
Yep.
days a year, and certainly not for 365 days a year, right?
Right.
And so like it should be pretty straightforward for Airbnb to simply have a little algorithm check. Okay, this is in New York City municipality. Is this an apartment? Is it being listed for this? For the same reason that an Uber, you couldn't get picked up at LAX
Yep.
until they would be like, "Oops, we're in LAX. It's illegal, so we're not going to have a ride there." Seems like they would be able to do that, and that was something that they were not doing.
Yeah. So this gets me irritated also, right? They know exactly what's going on. Their kind of game is to kind of rush, expand, get as big as possible before anyone notices what's going on, and then say, hey, we're this thing that you can't get rid of now. But they're a giant tech company, and their business is renting out apartments, and apartments have addresses. And so, a quick Google search, right? I don't know if they use Google. I don't know if they have like some kind of tech thing. But look, they have a map. They know where their stuff is.
Yeah.
They know how many nights a year something is getting used. They have, super detailed information about their users and people coming in. I mean, that's how they're valued at, $30 billion or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Because they can prove that they're making a lot of money. So, it's frustrating when you approach them with something like, we have a housing problem, you're making it worse, and they say, well, we don't know how to do that.
Yeah.
That's really hard for us to do. And it's like, no, I don't believe that. I don't believe that it is hard for them to actually, follow some rules, right? It's
Yeah, that's one of the things that bothers me about it's this funny flip side of internet culture where, I remember in the early 2000s, I was a huge internet person, and there were all these sites, you'd hear this a lot with piracy sites or things like that where they would say, hey, we're just the site. We can't police what people do. You should go after the individual people, not the site. And that made so much sense to me at the time. and to a certain extent still does. I don't think that someone should shut down the technology of BitTorrent because someone is using that in a bad way. But at the same time, when you've got these, you have a site that is providing a service that is enabling a new way of transacting a product, and that product has laws that are attached to it that are laws intended to safeguard people, then it seems that they do have a responsibility. But they sort of use almost the same argument of like, oh well, we're just the network provider. We're just connecting people together. We're not the middleman. We're just we're just putting pen pals together.
Sure, right. Yeah, they like to talk about themselves like they're a bulletin board. And folks are just kind of dropping by with their flyer, and you can tear a phone number off of it, and they don't know what's going on the bulletin board. But except they do know exactly what's going on there, and they know who's making their money. And it's not the grandma with a spare bedroom. They know that the folks that are making all the cash for them really is the guys that have multiple units. These are the guys that are taking over a whole building, or they've got 20 or 30 units kind of spread around the city.
Yeah.
So that's who's making the money. The guys that are like a hotel that have the time, and because dealing with tourists is a pain. Ask any housekeeper, right? It's gross and tedious work. So if you can turn it into a little bit of a business, then you're going to make more. You're going to stick around. Right?
So that's what happened to me. I lived in my last year in New York. I was living in the East Village. Me and my girlfriend. I had this dream to live in Manhattan, which was very stupid. We had a nice place in Greenpoint, but I was like, I want to live in Manhattan, and so we got a fifth floor walk up in the East Village, and we paid way too much for this tiny little apartment. But whatever. We were across the street from a pho place. It was amazing. It was fine for 9 months.
Right.
But so I noticed that it's very thin walls. It's classic New York living, radiator heat and stuff like that, banging radiator. And I started noticing that the noise from above our building, like the floor above us, was always different. It was never like one day it would be like children, like like people like wrestling and racing. And then the next day it would be like high heels, like clip, clop, clip, clop. And I was like, what's going on? And then we also noticed that we were like, hold on a second, there's entire 5-person European families trundling check baggage luggage up a 6th floor walk up and then hanging out on the stoop and stuff, and that was happening all the time. And my girlfriend she looked it up on Airbnb, and she was like, oh, I found the listing, and we could tell, didn't tell you the address, but it was the same layout as our apartment. Right. And so we saw that, and then we clicked on the person's name, and they had the same listing had over a dozen different apartments around the East Village, but all in different buildings. But they were all Ivan will meet you. And then, Ivan was so nice, he gave me the keys right away. But Ivan wasn't the name on the listing or whatever. And so it's difficult to say how much it would impacted our quality of life, but it was having new people in and out all the time. I was like, we're living in an apartment building, so we told the landlord, and they got him out of there. And then the landlord was like, you should have I want you to appear in court to testify against them. And we were like, this is way too serious. New York real estate is fucking insane. These people, it was crazy. I have stories on stories, but that's what opened my eyes to it. I was like, this person is so clearly in violation of the law. Who's taking out these multiple... Well, sorry. Maybe they're not in violation of the law. They probably are. But even if they're not, they're definitely in violation of a lot of leases. Because the lease explicitly said that you could not do it. And there's a boilerplate lease in New York. And so that's when I was like... I was like discovering a cockroach in my building. Because, this is... again, I'm paying to live in an apartment situation.
Right. That's right.
And so that was when I realized this is a weird sort of gray market business that Airbnb has allowed to spring up, and which is definitely taking in New York City in the East Village, that is taking rental units off the market 100%. Those people are obviously, that person renting that out is making so much more money than anyone else. And so they're going to drive. That is definitely driving up the already very expensive rents, and they're not doing anything about it. And so I was like, there's like a fishy element to it.
And I'm sure there's somebody that wants to live in the East Village, right? I mean, there's another you that's I want to live in the East Village, and I can't find a spot. I remember when I was first digging into this stuff, I was living in Hollywood, and I did not have a parking spot, and I was just racking up just stacks of parking tickets. So I wanted to look for a place to live. I liked my neighborhood. It was a good neighborhood. Couldn't find a place. And I was like, well, I'm doing this Airbnb thing. I wonder. And so, I mean, there are hundreds of units all around me that I couldn't move into, right? So it was like this incredible frustration that, I live in the city. I work here. I buy stuff here. I go out here. I contribute to the city. And, here's this, situation where other people like me can't, kind of make it work in a way that works for them because this company has kind of come in and done this stuff. I mean, it's super frustrating.
Well, let me ask you this, though, because I think the comparison between Airbnb and Uber makes a lot of sense to me, because they're both companies that I have qualms about, but yet you find yourself using when you're traveling. I prefer to stay in a hotel personally in a city, but there's plenty of times, now, I can go to an area I couldn't have even stayed in before because I can get a rental there, on Airbnb. Right. And I know so many people who say, oh, I hate hotels. I would much rather stay in one. It's changed how I travel. It's so revolutionary. And then you're going to I've gotten in so many fights with friends about this because it's my pet peeve. And, but they're like, no, this is great. I'm paying my mortgage with this thing, And so is there a chance that same way with Uber, I can get around the city. I have problems with the business model, but by God, I can get home safely on a Friday night after drinking, for a quarter of the price of a taxi. Yep. How can I argue with that? And so, well, I'll take the bad with the good, I guess. Yep. Is there a chance that Airbnb plays that same role despite this, or?
So, Uber is a whole other can of worms.
I'm not asking you to pass judgment on Uber. Don't worry.
But because I've been stranded and gotten places. So also, but I think that Airbnb is different though in that it's taking we have a really limited commodity. Like here in LA, we don't have a shortage of cars. We have a lot of cars. We have a lot of people that drive. That's that is what it is.
Buses exist, yeah.
They exist also, and we don't have like the taxi kind of culture that we in other places. So, but with Airbnb, they're taking something that is really hard to replace. It's a real pain to build new housing. Again, lots of other reasons. It's not about Airbnb, not on Airbnb to build new housing, but when you have a new building going up and immediately a huge chunk of that becomes an Airbnb instead of getting rented out. There's no way out. We're not going to be able to build our way out of this problem. There's no way that we're going to be able to add new housing if as soon as we put, and these are buildings that would be most attractive, right, to turn into a pseudo hotel because they're new. They're new. Yeah. They've got amenities. They're like condo buildings.
I hadn't even thought
fancy new apartments, right?
I hadn't even thought of that because there's a huge push to build new housing in LA right now. It's like on every ballot. Yep. There's a housing related ballot measure, but because the demand for housing is so high,
and we got to build. We got to build.
Yeah, but you think the demand for tourist accommodations is so high that could easily just fill up all those buildings too?
Yeah, I mean the way it works that we've seen it at any rate is that when you put a renter dollars against a tourist dollar, the renter's going to lose. They can't afford to compete. And the even worst part of this is that having the option of Airbnb means that you as a building owner, you never have to lower your rent to get somebody in. If you're having trouble filling your space, rather than what the quote free market would say, which is lower the price to get somebody in there, why do that if you can just swing that unit over to the Airbnb market and you make triple the amount? Well, that's a win-win, and you never have to rent it out. You never have to get into a lease. And on the leases, I mean, that's Airbnb is not going to defend you if your landlord finds out and you get evicted. There's no legal fund for Airbnb hosts that are getting evicted by their landlords. So it's a huge risk for tenants in a lot of cities that these companies are not they're happy to have you share all your stuff, but they're not going to bail you out if you end up without an apartment. I mean,
so that's a separate issue. You're talking when they sort of encourage somebody who's in a lease situation to be the host,
right?
Or to say, this sort of situation, I'm going to be out of town for 2 weeks, or that kind of thing. So that's the kind of sharing that Airbnb loves to trumpet of like, I'm just sharing my home for a little bit, but they don't help you if you accidentally
it's a kind of answer.
lease.
If you've got a mortgage, if you're a homeowner. I guess that's been going on for a long time. People have been renting out rooms in their homes. That's not new. But like you said, a lot of leases, boilerplate leases say you can't sublet without my permission as a landlord. You can't do that. You can't make extra money off of my unit. And so, there have been many cases where tenants have been, evicted because they. It's a lease. It's a lease. It's like nothing to do with the city. But it is what it is. You get kicked out and. Tough, right? There's no Airbnb fund. They're not going to come and bail you out of a landlord-tenant court or whatever.
Right. So. There was also getting back to the idea of because I was so interested in that it removes the pressure on the landlords to reduce rental prices. So normally they can't fill up their whole building, at $1,000 a month, and so they say, oh, geez, we got to go down to $900 because we got to fill these units. But if they have that extra little bit of flex, they can do that first.
Right.
You even once, I think, if I remember correctly, just from us talking on set. You said something like, even if they can just rent out a unit a couple days a year or something like that, like that'll have that pressure. Like if they can fill the little gaps, then it's almost, if you look at like the total number of days the rooms in a building are being rented out like it can remove fractional apartments from the market, kind of.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. So they never have to. I mean, there are places where I feel like they would never have to put something out, right? They would never have to lease it out or. To list it on apartments.com or, whatever the site is that they use because they can just fill those gaps, especially if you've got like we do, kind of close into downtown, a lot of corporate housing, right? So that you've got like a 6-month contract with, I don't know, like whatever, GE, Staples Center, to house somebody that's just moving to town for 6 months, right? They come in, they stay for 6 months. You put it on Airbnb for a month, and then your next 6-month contract comes in. So you just never even have to bother with an outside person, right? So.
Wow, and that one Airbnb month is taken. That's a month of housing,
and
it's
a lot of money.
Yeah,
it's a chunk of money for them as well.
Well, we are here talking to Roy Samaan. We will be back in just a moment, so please stick around.
Hi, everybody. I'm Justin McElroy.
I'm Travis McElroy.
I'm Griffin McElroy.
And we host the first podcast ever made, My Brother, My Brother and Me.
Every Monday, we put out the first ever advice comedy podcast ever.
They found our podcast on Dead Sea Scrolls.
We're the Hammurabi Code of podcasts, and we're ready to entertain you with jokes that we invented, the first jokes.
So join us every Monday on MaximumFun.org.
You'll never crack our code, Dan Brown. Just try me.
It's history in the making.
And in the faking. And it's all yours for the taking.
I'm here talking to Lane researcher and policy analyst Roy Samaan. What about is there any effect on home ownership? Because look, when I go to, I'm at the age where me and my girlfriend will go to an open house on a Saturday because it's in the neighborhood and it's fun to go make fun of the terrible flip job or whatever.
Yes.
Housing in LA is way too crazy to to buy anything, but it's fun to go. It's fun to go look, and so much of the time they say, oh, you can this room you can Airbnb. And so it's, and actually, I have some friends who did that. They say, well, I bought my house and but I'm able to buy it because on Airbnb I can rent out the extra room. And so that helps me pay the mortgage. And so now I can buy a better house. Is that not a benefit or?
I mean, yes and no. I mean, yes, it's a benefit for them, totally. Except for the fact that they've got to have an extra person in and out. I mean, that's, I think we talk about this thing like it's this great thing, but just on a day-to-day, I mean, it's, I imagine it's a little bit annoying, right? You've got to the keys and the bathrooms and the towels and all
that's
that.
the part that people don't talk about is they say, "Oh, just Airbnb." You go to these places. They're like, "Well, you can just Airbnb that."
Sure.
And it's like, well, you can just run a hotel.
Yeah,
you could just
exactly.
like be a hotelier
Yeah.
in your part time. I'm like, I don't want to do that shit.
No,
Like,
thank you.
But it's presented as being like, oh yeah, just you'll make money for free and you won't have to do anything, but you have to like clean the thing, or they can have
Right. If you're the homeowner, right? If you're doing
Right.
one of these big apartments, then whatever. But I would imagine that what we started seeing was like Coldwell Banker and real estate agents, like you said, marketing and saying, look, you can make a ton more money. You can make money. It's like a duplex without having to rent to tenants, basically, right? So you don't have to deal with like rent control. You can just have some Germans come in and pay you some money, and
Right.
you make them pancakes and whatever, and it's a great commercial for Airbnb, but too bad if somebody wanted to live there, right? It's unfortunate.
So yeah, because people, previously in LA might buy a building, or they would buy a duplex and they'd rent out half of it, they'd live in the other half.
Yep.
I see. Does it affect like how the purchase prices of homes at all? Or?
I mean, I've been thinking about that. I mean, I think that if there's income potential, then you can ask for more, right? If you have a house and it's got a little granny unit in the back, little mother-in-law unit in the backyard, you can ask for more now. So I mean, I would ask your friends, would you rather be able to get in there and make ends meet with this Airbnb, or just pay less up front?
Yeah,
to just have the house, right?
That's what I noticed, because a few of these places you'll go in and they'll have taken a backyard shed or a sort of downstairs unfinished basement or something, and then they'll finish it up. They'll put a little keypad and they'll put in an extra stove and stuff, and then they'll say, "Oh, you can Airbnb that," and now it's an extra $50, $100 or whatever.
Right. That's right.
And in again a housing purchase market or whatever, the other kind of housing, not the housing rental market, the other one, whatever you call it.
Buying stuff.
Buying the house one. That's also one of the most expensive in the country.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm very interested in these downsides, right?
Yep.
And you are too, and that's why we had you on the show, and that's why we're talking about it. But I want to make sure that we do justice to how much people love the service and the potential of it. And it was really interesting because we got a very strong response to this one that was very interesting. This is the first one where people said to this segment, they would tweet at me and people would say, "I'm sorry to see that you're in the pocket of the hotel lobby." And I was like, I actually never really thought about the fact that there would be a hotel lobby. I mean, clearly there would be, but it never occurred to me. This was my own observation as someone who sort of like, cares about rental housing, prices for my own, wonky reasons. But there is that argument that like, in a lot of cities that, you've got a powerful hotel lobby. The hotel prices are so expensive. It's very difficult to visit those cities. For a lot of people, they do think, well, the price of housing is high. If I can rent out part of it, then it will help me pay for it, won't it? I mean, these are arguments that seem to have merit.
Yeah, those are all real things. I mean, I have been accused also of being, I guess this hotel lobby is hiring a lot of people. They're on like a spree because I guess I'm on their payroll. I wasn't aware, but
wow. I mean, you do have some really fancy cufflinks and a top hat on.
My monocle. So there's that. I mean, that's absurd, right? And the hotel industry has been doing fine. Like, they don't need me. I wish they have tons of money.
But the hotel lobby has like lobbied against Airbnb, correct?
No, they have. I mean, that's undeniable. I mean, they see it as a threat to their business.
Mm-hmm.
But I think here in LA, it's a little bit of a twist. So this is why I laugh when people accuse me of being on the hotel lobby. The first thing I worked on at Lane was raising the minimum wage for hotel housekeepers, for hotel workers. They really don't like us at all, right? But here's the thing: they when that happened here in LA, they fought us a lot, hard, tooth and nail. But when it passed, they followed the law, they followed the rules. They didn't like it, but they did it. And the same with kind of Americans with disabilities, kind of accessibility stuff. They follow a lot of rules, right? And I think from their perspective, they're saying, look, we raised our wages. We're following all these, work rules and labor rules and health and safety rules. And, here are these guys that are popping up all around us because, hotels and Airbnb are kind of stacked in many of the same neighborhoods that don't have to pay whoever's cleaning it, who knows, but they're not getting the $15 wage. They're, there's like all these other rules that are not being followed. And so I think there's a little bit of bitterness on their part.
So that they have to follow public safety regulations or labor regulations that the Airbnbs don't. And so they feel like they can't compete because they're being the good guys, kind of.
I mean, yeah, in this case, it's unusual, but in this case, it's the hotels that are like kind of the good guys. I mean, it's, this new economy, crosses a lot of wires, right? And it brings different things together that are weird. So,
I mean, that's what, they say that's disruption, right? That's what the tech industry loves is disruption. And I mean, those are the, ride sharing and these short-term rentals are definitely super disruptive.
Yeah, no, they are. The funny thing is it's odd, right? So I'm like, yes, you guys disrupted your industry, but you also disrupted a lot of the old relationships so that now, I can, we have a lot of folks from Benedict Canyon, like homeowners associations from the hills that are, trying to join us in this kind of thing to get some rules passed. And we've got hotel general managers and hotel housekeepers sitting down together and thinking about how to like tackle this because everyone's now got a stake. Like it brought all these, people that don't like each other to start thinking about, well, I guess I've got to talk to this horrible person for a little bit at least until we figure out this thing, right? So it's created, it's like scrambled a lot of stuff. I mean, it has. Yeah. So I guess hats off for that. But anyway.
Well,
yes.
so Airbnb, I think would dispute some of the findings that you guys would have that Airbnb is raising housing prices. Yeah. I know that they've issued various reports, or they would point to reports saying that they have not had that effect. How do you respond to those things that is sort of beyond a statistical he said, she said? He said, Roy said, Airbnb said.
there you go. Yeah, I mean, that's something they do like to say, that, there's millions of units of housing all over L.A., all over New York, all over San Francisco, whatever it is, whatever city it is. I mean, they like to recycle their arguments, right, which is good, I guess, recycling. But at any rate, so they like to say, look, we have maybe 20,000 units in LA, and there's like millions of units of housing all over the city. So we can't possibly have an effect.
That's a fair point. That sounds like a fact we would use on the show.
Sure, it does.
Less than 1%.
Less than 1% of the, but then you zoom into Venice, or you zoom into Hollywood, or Santa Monica, or Silver Lake, or what we're even seeing is neighborhoods like where we're at right now in Westlake, or Korea, kind of neighborhoods that are next to popular neighborhoods. In the percentage of Airbnbs relative to how many vacancies there are, suddenly you see that they're taking up a much higher chunk of the vacancies than across the entire city, because folks are not coming to LA and staying in Airbnbs in like faraway places out in the valley. They're coming, they want to go.
Azusa, that's a place in LA, right?
Yes, it is.
I've only lived here a couple of years. I don't know all the neighborhoods. Azusa sounds like one you wouldn't go.
I mean, as a tourist, probably not.
What's the one from Crazy Ex-Girlfriend? It's
West Covina.
West Covina. Yep. Not a lot of Airbnbs in West Covina. That's a couple million or that's a bunch of units of housing.
Right. It's in the county. I mean, it's there.
But Echo Park, Santa Monica, West Hollywood.
The places downtown, when a tourist comes to LA, or a business traveler, anyone that's coming to visit the city, they're probably going to go to Staples Center in downtown, or they're going to go to the beach or Hollywood. Those are the places that people visit, and those are the neighborhoods that are making all the money for the company. And so, when you look at those neighborhoods, then yes, there is a problem there, and we see like the rents are going up much more quickly in those areas than in the rest of the city. And then I guess they'll say, well, no, it can't just be us. There's other things happening. Like, of course, there's other things happening, but you're not helping, right?
Yeah.
It's not helpful at a time when we don't have enough as it is. It's not helpful to remove a couple hundred more apartments off.
Yeah.
When we're already kind of, barely making ends meet as
And what's funny about these companies is it feels like just like you're not helping, you guys aren't being helpful. These are companies that very well could be helpful and present themselves with the sort of bright, shiny tech industry, like, wow, we're just helping the average folks. But they're full of smart people who know their housing policy, or I think about, the ride sharing companies too. Those, there's a lot of people I know for a fact working for those companies who are out, who are out of politics or who've worked for the city, who know these things. And so they could easily say, how are we going to, contribute how are we going to play ball? And there's examples of that. I look at ride sharing at LAX, the way they brought that in, and it plays very nicely with all the existing players. It doesn't cause a big traffic jam. They did it They did it right. Mwah.
That's right.
They did a good job.
They nailed it.
It feels like they could do the same thing. Like Airbnb could do that, but hasn't.
I wish they would disrupt inequality or something for once, right? There's a lot of terrible things that could use some disrupting. That is not, the ability of families to stay in their homes. That didn't need that was already before. Yeah. That didn't need a disruption, right? Yeah. People were getting kicked out of housing before they showed up. But I think there is a role for them to play. Like they can I think do right by the cities where they're in. If they just follow some real basic rules and I think it might be. For them, they got big really, really fast, right? Mm-hmm. And there never really was. And it took a long time for cities to figure out what was going on. That's fair. So now that we're all kind of caught up, it's like, well, here we are.
I think that's
you need the cities just as much as and we as a city don't really need as LA anyway. We have tourists coming. We're okay on tourists. The
service can benefit individuals, but the city as a total organism.
Right.
Oh, that has an interesting resonance with our very first podcast episode with Selita Reynolds from LADOT, which go back and listen to it if you guys haven't heard. It's one of my favorite ones we've done. But we talked about with ride sharing how it was almost and this is sort of her POV. It was almost a failure on city transportation systems to not do ride sharing first. That it's that we have this wonderful history in the U.S. of cities helping people move from place to place, and this was a case where they left this hole for the private industry, and they really should have been on the ball. Do you feel the same way about America's cities in this issue?
Yeah, I think that this gets at something way outside of sharing and Airbnb, but I think it goes back to wages, and people are broke, right? They need help making ends meet themselves, and that if you go back and look at some of the early marketing and kind of analysis that Airbnb did, they really kind of came together in 2008, 2009 in a pretty deep recession. People were struggling. So I think if we as a country, as a city, did better, right, by having people make more money, then we wouldn't be in a situation where that was necessary. And it shouldn't be necessary for you to have people coming in and out of your house all year. That shouldn't be.
You shouldn't need to rent out your home just to stay in your home.
That's right. Right. There's something I think a little bit weird about that, a little bit unfortunate, right?
Well, it's that vision, that negative vision that people have of the ride share or of the sharing economy, where it's like. Everyone's gonna shit the gig economy. Everyone can make a little money with the thing that they're not using, their car that they're not using, or whatever.
Right.
Everyone's got a little extra space they can monetize. So there's a positive vision of that, but there's a negative vision of that, which is that the only way to keep afloat, you must sell all of you got to rent out your clothes to people when you're not wearing them, and you've got to, or there's that funny irony about about that Uber ad with the, like everybody needs a side hustle. You've seen that ad?
Yes.
When it's like this teacher, he's like, everybody needs a side hustle. And a friend of mine, I can't remember who, but it was a comic friend of mine tweeted, fuck Uber for trying to convince us that a science teacher needs a side hustle.
Yeah.
Like, that's such an irony that the guy is like, he's like teaching kids, he's got a beaker, and then he's like, I've got a Uber. Like a science teacher needs to like, after teaching for 10 hours, has to go start up the Uber app on his way home in order to get a couple rides to make a living. That's a very dark vision.
Yeah, that's pretty foul, I think. That's gross. Teachers they're hustling. They have one, and it's a lot as it is. And I think a lot of folks, their main hustle, whatever their main thing is already a lot. And I think this whole sharing, economy, thing that's happening. it's like stressing people out. It's you gotta share your car and your extra house, and if you have extra time, then you go pick up a TaskRabbit job and plant trees for somebody. You don't have anything left that's just yours and you can just have.
Oh.
Right? You just have it. That's just a space that you have, and that's what it is. Like maybe I like my extra bedroom as my place that I go and unwind, and that's my chill out spot, right?
Yeah, and it's a bummer to not be able to have that.
Right.
Let me ask you this. So I think part of the division with Airbnb is one of the big sort of unacknowledged divisions in American life, which is like the difference between like the city life and the country life. Not even in red state, blue state. Uh-huh. It's just like the priorities of those lives. Like Airbnb makes so much sense in Joshua Tree, right?
Yep.
Which, if you guys, for those who aren't in California, that's like way out in the desert. People drive out there away from the city. Not many people actually live there, but a lot of people like to go visit. There's not really hotel accommodations,
right.
So there's a lot of people who rent out their homes, and that kind of totally makes sense because I need a place to stay when I'm in Joshua Tree, and I don't know, let those people make some money.
Yeah.
Like, who the fuck is going to stop them? But then in a city has totally different priorities,
right.
and what always struck me about Uber and Airbnb, especially in New York, as a child of New York, New York is a city with a long history of sort of taking care of its citizens, and every problem in New York City is like, the city was about to fall apart and explode, and then they made a law to stop it. Like, it's like, there's trash in the streets, we gotta get people to take it away. There's like horrible slums. We got to create rent control. You know, like that's
right.
everything is there for a reason.
Right.
And so, there's this strong idea living there. I'm like, the city needs to have control over what's happening in it. If you didn't have regulations of some kind in the East Village or the Lower East Side, and this speaks to what you're saying about neighborhoods, about being different neighborhood by neighborhood, because no one's trying to Airbnb in the Bronx, but or there are parts of the Bronx, but
that's right.
or on Staten Island or whatever. But if you didn't have those regulations on the Lower East Side or the East Village, nobody would live there.
Right.
It would be 100% tourist housing.
Yeah.
And it's like the city and the people of the city, through their elected officials, should get to decide whether it's important to them to have there be residential housing, in the Lower East Side. If whether we want that to be hollowed out and become blocks and blocks of hotels or not.
Right.
But at the same time, I got to acknowledge, cities are often very bad at organizing these things, right?
Yes.
At giving, at accommodating tourists, or at, I'm not, I would never defend the taxi and limousine, commission when I'm talking about issues with Uber.
Yep.
So, how do we rectify that issue? I don't want to raise up the municipal solution.
They need a crisis usually, right? They're not gonna do it on their own, and it's the truth. And the taxi and limousine commission and the hotel industry were not gonna. I'll think about the hotel. The hotel industry here in LA was not going to develop a compassion for affordable housing naturally. That wasn't going to happen. And in the same way that I think the cities need a crisis to start to act, right? So, in a sense, this for Airbnb, it kind of just threw one extra piece, one extra log on the fire, I guess, of our housing crisis in a lot of cities where, there was already this struggle to kind of keep up with what we needed to be doing as cities. And then right here comes this huge shiny object to just kind of, maybe it's like a magnifying glass. That's the shiny object. It's a magnifying glass to just kind of be like, hey, here's housing. We're going to, here you go. Take an extra look at this thing because we're going to go ahead and monetize whatever's left. We're going to go ahead and make it that much worse.
Wow.
And so then, I think it kind of focused a little bit of attention, right? And, I don't think that passing a law about Airbnb is going to fix the housing stuff here in LA, but it's going to, bring some like sensibility back to it, some rationality.
Are there laws being considered, or is there?
Yeah.
Do you see positive movement on the issue either from Airbnb or from the city?
Yeah. Yes.
Or nationally,
There are like kind of cities. They talk to each other. It's interesting to see kind of how they play this kind of game of telephone, where one city will try something and fall on their faces, and then the next city will be like, well, what if we try this other twist, and then that totally blows up. And so LA. I'm an LA guy. I've lived here a long time, so I can say this. Sometimes slow to move, not the most nimble, right? But in this case, we waited and we saw what other cities tried, and we were like, okay, let's do something new here. Let's try this. And so we've got something moving through that we're hoping in the next couple weeks. But they've been saying that for a year. So
and that's
but there is something like in City Hall. There is kind of a framework that we at Lane worked on. We kind of proposed this framework, and so they're putting something together.
And what would that be?
Yeah. So basically, there should be a registration system. So if you want to do this, quick, simple, something quick and painless, but that it's got to be your primary residence. So that basically means one per person, right? So we don't have this situation. And really, what we ID'd as the issue was commercialization. Like we don't have a problem, because LA has the movie industry and everything. There are people that are moving in and out throughout the year, so there is like a need in the city to rent out space.
Absolutely.
So let's not ruin that, but let's make sure that we're not losing whole buildings or multiple units, right? So it's one per person. It's got to be where you actually live.
So this would be like the person living in the apartment, not the landlord would be the person renting it out.
Right. Well, yes, that's the idea. They would have to talk to their landlord first, right, to clear that up, so that they, if anyone's listening, I'm not sure, but I hope. Talk to your. Don't get evicted over this, please. Like
people, don't break your lease. I don't know why I'd tell a podcast audience, but please don't go out there breaking your lease.
It's not worth it. It's not worth it for whatever you're going to make. Airbnb your apartment is going to be a lot less than having to go move and find a new place, and that's just a bad way to go. So. Anyway, but it would be the person that actually lives there, right? They get that cleared up. But here in LA, though, we are trying to make sure that you can't do this in rent-controlled units. So if you have a rent-controlled apartment, which here in LA at least, it limits the amount of rent, the amount that the rent can be increased.
Right.
You don't get to have that deal, right, where you have a lower rent and then also make a ton of extra money.
That wouldn't be fair, because then the taxpayers would be subsidizing your rental.
That's right. So those are kind of the basic rules, and that the companies, mostly Airbnb, but also VRB. I mean, all of these guys would have to share some data with the city, share some information, so that the city could at least verify that they're getting the right amount of their tourist tax or whatever it is. They got to verify where these things are, that sort of thing.
Now, is that so? That all makes sense to me. I can imagine there's some stakeholders who say, "Wait a second, that takes a lot of money out of my pocket." That for the landlord or for Airbnb themselves, is anybody organizing against that?
Yeah, I mean, there are. I think that from the part of folks that do Airbnb, so these are the hosts. I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about what we're actually trying to do. So we're not trying to shut down this whole system of how things go right now. That's not what we're about. So the stuff that though they get upset about is the sharing information pieces, and we do have in there that you've got to have a cap on the number of nights you can do it per year. Right now it's at 180 nights, so it's 6 months is where it's at. I think that's a little high, frankly, but.
It sounds fair.
Yeah.
Especially if your break-even point's 83 days or whatever you said.
Yeah. So they don't want any cap, right? They want to have the ability to do this endlessly. But, we haven't talked much about kind of the neighborhood character, quality of life stuff, and that's real. You have, folks that are longtime residents of their neighborhoods. They don't know their neighbors anymore. I mean, that's, that's why people like living in places for a long time. Sure. And so we're trying to, find some balance between all these different chunks of interest that are trying to figure out what to do. So we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Do you have, for the person who, is going to go on a trip out to, San Francisco or Joshua Tree or wherever they go, do you have any piece of advice for the person who is considering the Airbnb rental or the person who's considering renting it out. You know, because I don't want people to think that we're saying that's unethical. I don't believe it's unethical to do those things, and
So there's definitely a way to do this in an ethical way. So if you're traveling. And since I've been doing this work, I have people, I'm like their Airbnb priests where they confess to me that like I'm going out of town and I'm gonna get an Airbnb. I'm like, okay, it's all right.
Roy, I'm so
sorry.
I'm so sorry. You don't know how many people
God.
I've got. People do that to me with about 50 different topics.
Sure, I bet, right?
They're like, I'm getting a purebred dog, and I bought an engagement ring.
Yeah.
I'm wearing Tom's shoes. Oh, I'm so sorry, Adam. Like, no, it's fine. I do half the things we say not to do on the show.
Absolutely,
you
man.
can't be a you can't
Nobody's perfect.
You can't be a monk.
You've got to live.
Yeah.
So when people do ask me this, I have kind of a little checklist, I guess, which is take a look at the person that it would be your host, right? See, on Airbnb you can check how many listings they've got. If that's their one listing that they've got. Chances are this is really somebody that is trying to make ends meet, that it, kind of living up to the story, right? So that they're going out of town, and it really is kind of a swap. You want to check the reviews also, right? Make sure that there's a lot of reviews because there's some health hazards, right? There's a reason that hotels have, industrial like laundry facilities in their basement to deal with just some grossness. So. You want to make sure that it's kind of reputable in that sense. But I think the main thing is to really try to get a feel for the place you're staying. Make sure that it's not part of like a mini empire of Airbnbs throughout the city. And I think that's kind of the easiest way.
This reminds me. I'm sorry. Can I just tell a story? This is like not even this. And honestly, this story is going to come out pro Airbnb at the end. It's going to sound anti Airbnb, but it's actually pro Airbnb. Before we did the first season of the show, me and my director and a couple of my producers were like, "Hey, let's go on a little weekend retreat so we can talk about the show." And so we got an Airbnb way out in. I honestly forget where, by Valencia or somewhere.
Sure.
You drive an hour and a half out of LA,
right.
You're in a mountain, and so that's my use for Airbnb. Is like, I want to get a big house for a bunch of friends to go, drink in, and there's a hot tub, and we are going to get away.
Yeah.
I think that's really nice. But here's the problem with Airbnb versus hotels. We get there, it's like, the guy owner, his name is Gary. It's like, some photos, they're very beautiful. We go in, it's blasting contemporary Christian music, and not like nice like guitar stuff. It was like really loud, and then the whole thing is not just Christian art. And by the way, that's fine, but it's specifically like evangelical Christian art designed to convert you. It's like there's like Jesus, and it's like if you accept Jesus into your heart, there's a plaque underneath. And Gary says, so you stay here. Oh, by the way, there's just some art in the walls. It's like a museum. You just take a look around. Anyway, here's the bed, and here's the other thing. And by the way, this is a very garish house. This is like. And there's almost no furniture. There's like no curtains on any of the windows. There's only some like leather couches on the middle of like a bare wooden floor, extremely uncomfortable. And then everywhere, there was like two of the bedrooms had enormous crucifixes, wooden crucifixes. I'm not talking on the wall. I'm talking like the kind of crucifix like from Passion of the Christ that he had to carry around on his back, like like full-size crucifixes. And then there were like pamphlets, and there was like all of this stuff where it was a conversion house. It was designed to get you to go and come away. And very nice guy. And here's the other part. As we started looking around the property, big property, and there was like this old like horse stable on the property with like concrete and like horseshoes, and it clearly didn't match the house. And we were like, what the hell is this? And so we spent the weekend trying to figure out, like, who is this guy and what is this? Like, because everything was from different time periods. It was like this guy made his money 10 years ago. But the house was clearly built in the 90s. The shower was made of rocks. Does that make sense? It was like this old decor.
Yes.
And then there was this horse stable that like didn't make sense with the rest of the property. We spent the whole time, we were like, okay, we think he bought this place, but then he got a bad divorce and his wife left. But then he became Christian, and then he started putting this art up. And so this is, and so this whole mystery.
Yes.
And then he finally came back, and we were like, we're like, what, Gary? What's the? Oh yeah, we loved saying, what's the history of the property? And he's like, oh, this used to be a Jewish day camp in the 50s, and then this one guy built the house, during like a housing boom, and then he lost it, and then I bought it, and then etc. And it was this bizarre experience, where we were out in the mountains with where we were assaulted by Christian art and stuff, and it was not an experience that you get at the Marriott.
Absolutely. Yep.
It was the West End doesn't provide it.
It was a unique time, and it's a good story.
Yeah,
and it's a really good story. That was a
journey.
I was like, where are we?
But then the problem with Airbnb is my friend was like, who is Jewish? My friend was like, I don't know what to rate him, and I'm like, you have to write in the review. You have to write in the review.
No, they gotta know.
There's an enormous amount of Christian art in the room,
know.
and it made us uncomfortable. It did make them. It made a couple of my friends uncomfortable because they were not. They felt a little bit, under attack.
Sure.
Or whatever. They were like, it's not okay for it to not be warned. But they were terrified. My friend was terrified that he was going to get a bad rating back from the guy. So he gave him 5 stars and he said, wonderful stay. And I was like, this is there's a lot of good and bad in this story, I think.
Yeah. That's a lot of stuff.
I'm sorry.
But the ratings thing is true. Like, people lie on ratings. I mean, let's talk about Yelp. I've been to some terrible restaurant. I'm like, who gave these stars out? This is disgusting, right? Ooh. It's the same story. It's, people are not, they're like, yeah, whatever, 5, sure.
Yeah.
So you get an experience, but again, that's out in the woods where there used to be a day camp. And I think it has a role, like out in Palm Springs or resort places up by Tahoe. Those are places that's a normal part of living out there.
Yeah,
right.
Vacation rentals.
It's been around for like forever and ever. So that's another. Put that on your check. If you want to go out to a resort area out in the go for it.
Yeah,
find a place. They've got it down to a science out there, right? Yeah. They know how to do it. In the city, not so much. I mean, that's not so helpful. And we don't have as much of that understanding of, what the hell's going on. And there's always the roller bags. You mentioned the roller bags. That's like the number one thing that drives people crazy, apparently, is the rolly bags, because they just, I don't know, I guess they make a noise and it's, you can hear it, right? It's
was like boom, boom, boom,
especially
boom,
with stairs,
boom.
right? I mean, it's just, it drives you wild, drives you mad. So,
it just seems like it's a balance of there's the good, there's so much good that comes out of the service, but then it's like you want to see that company and that community that is sort of using the service and is built around it, and the city in general, really take ownership of the effects that it has and be a good neighbor.
Yeah. I mean, I think part of what bothers me so much is like, just admit that there's a problem. I mean, why are we pretending that this is? I mean, come on, you guys. You're all smart people. Like, do better. You can do it.
Yeah.
You're smart.
Come on, guys.
You can get it together. I have faith in you, in your ability to get your shit together a little bit and just own up to what's going on here. I mean, we have asked that of companies throughout history, right? When something new starts happening, we're like, no, that's a bad side effect. We need to figure that out.
Do you see them getting it at all? I mean, do you see progress at all from the industry?
They, I think they're slowly coming around to the fact that they're just going to have to get it. Mm-hmm. I don't know if they've had an epiphany or whatever, but I think they're starting to realize, and I think a lot of these sharing companies are starting to realize, like, we're better off in the long run if we can find a way to kind of play nice and not piss off everybody everywhere we go. Yeah, there's a way for us to stick around in the long haul by kind of playing nice a little bit. Yeah, it's nobody. That's the thing, is that it's not anybody trying to shut down these services. Right. It's just saying, like, hey, play nice with me and I'll play nice with you. Right. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on. It's been great. I really appreciate it. Thanks for talking to us about this. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
Thank you once again to Roy for coming on the show. Thank you guys for listening. And that is it this week for Adam Ruins Everything, the podcast. We will be back in 2 weeks, so please tune in then. Our producer is Sharon Morris. You can also support Adam Ruins Everything by telling a friend about our podcast. Please do. And by subscribing to us on iTunes or your favorite podcast app. And don't forget to leave us a rating or comment wherever you subscribe, because I've heard that helps out with algorithms. Algorithms love it when you rate, and people use these algorithms to listen to podcasts. Can you imagine such a world? Your grandma would be so shocked if she found out this is what you were doing with audio. But hey, it's 2017, and we're going wild. Again, Adam Ruins Everything is currently in the off-season, but you can find clips and full episodes at truetv.com/AdamRuinsEverything and the Watch True TV app. Thank you guys so much for listening. We'll see you next time.
MaximumFun.org.
Comedy and culture.
Artist owned.
Listener supported.